promoting mindful well-being in everyday life. This is the Pragmatic Alchemy Podcast with your host, Courtney Edwards.
Hi, and welcome back to Pragmatic Alchemy Podcast. I'm Courtney Edwards, and I'll be your host. Today, we are welcoming Jemma Schwartz to the show. Jemma is a Hudson Valley area psychotherapist and yoga teacher, and we're going to be talking about one of the areas that Jemma specializes in her psychotherapy practice, which is nervous system and emotional regulation. So we're going to be talking about all of the ways in which we become quote unquote triggered. I actually don't prefer that phrase. I often will use the term activated, just because I think that the trigger word is a bit played out, and it doesn't always, to me, specify what is actually happening. Because what is happening when somebody is activated is their autonomic arousal system, their sympathetic nervous system, their fight, flight, or freeze response has been activated by something in their environment. And it's a really natural occurrence. It's designed to keep us safe. The problem is our nervous systems don't always understand the difference between a life and death threat and something that just makes us really uncomfortable or gives us big, hot, fiery kinds of emotions. And so we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about specific ways that you can begin to regulate your own emotional response and your own nervous system if and when these types of activations happen to you. So let's get started. Hi, Jemma. How are you today?
I'm well. How are you, Courtney?
I'm good. I'm so excited that you're here. We've had to postpone a couple of times, I think. So it has taken us a while to come to this place.
Finally here, and so glad to be meeting today.
Yes, me too. Me too. So before we get started, why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. So my name is Jemma Schwartz. I have a small private practice in New Paltz, New York, where I see mostly adults, mostly women or people who identify as women, and some teenagers as well. My approach is pretty eclectic, and I do a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, which is using the body and the nervous system to help to just heal our systems and heal our minds and live a little bit more balanced and happy.
Yeah, so I have been completely geeking out on nervous systems, just as a thing.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible.
Yeah, like I feel like for me, maybe one of the first avenues in I had was reading The Body Keeps the Score.
Mm-hmm.
And just really starting to connect dots that I had kind of experienced in my own life to be like, what is happening here? or recognizing some of the things that I had known to happen, but didn't really have language for. So how did you first get interested in this?
So I grew up in the dance studio. Mm-hmm. And so I learned this really experientially to start, where I could go in. Of course, I was a teenager going through all the ups and downs and breakups and all that stuff. And, there were times where I could go into the studio and just feel like a hot mess and just move my body and come out just glowing. Mm. And so I kind of thought I invented this thing when I was like 18 or 19, be like, people should do this. Like, people should use acting and dance, and this really works. And come to find out, people do this. This is a thing. And so as an adult, I stopped dancing, but I found yoga. And once again, it was this thing wow, I do this and it unifies my body and mind. I feel great. And then I'm also a yoga teacher. I did a 200-hour training. And after that, I've been just wanting to learn and learn and learn. And I did a trauma-informed yoga therapy certification process. It was about a year-long experience with Sundara yoga therapy. brilliant, amazing unicorn people doing that work. And it's all based on polyvagal theory.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd read a little bit about Stephen Porges' stuff, and I'd read The Healing Power of the Vagus Nerve by Stanley Rosenberg. So I had some of that knowledge going in, but that training also really put all the pieces together in a way as well about just, all the things that the mental health world and my experience in it had been missing. So I felt like all my worlds kind of came together and kind of gave a scientific base for things that I'd experienced personally and observed, and I've been doing that work since.
Beautiful. Can you give just sort of a beginner's overview of polyvagal theory for folks that maybe don't know what that is or have heard it and don't really quite understand?
Sure. So the idea is, so many people are somewhat familiar with fight, flight, or freeze, that language. So basically our nervous systems have all these ways in which they function. There are things that kind of move up, and think of like a way it's like hot, right? Like it's like we're trying to escape danger. We get anxious. We get a bit angry. And if that's the case, our autonomic nervous system is activated at that point. We're not in balance. At that point, we can't think clearly. It might be that we know all the coping skills, but they go out the window. We can't think strategically. At that point, we're just kind of going off of what's happened before, our base patterns, and trying to get out or change the scenario in some way. And then there's this dorsal vagal shutdown that also happens on the other side of the sphere, which is this kind of curling in. Think of like when you've had a loss or you're really depressed and things just like, it's like the world just feels bleak and you feel like you're kind of turning inward. And that really is what's happening in your body. Mm-hmm. And then there's the ideal place to be, which is the ventral vagal, which is this balance point. And that is when you're feeling really good and you're in a flow and you're open and conversational and in connection. That's where your nervous system is. So very often people have these ways in which they go more prominently, either up or down. And that might be based off of early childhood experiences. But often we're bouncing all over the place. But we do want to work on noticing the times when we do feel like we are in the flow. And this is a muscle that can absolutely be cultivated. It's something that even if you've only felt it in like tiny little bits throughout your life, like you can train this within your system and have it more.
Right. And the vagal nerve runs from the brain to the intestines, right? Am I getting that part right?
It runs all the way through. Yeah. Some of it, the sciencey stuff, like I'd say right before I had my baby, I was like getting really into the study of it. And then since then, it's all gotten really blurry in my brain. So
yes.
But it is something that goes basically all the way through our system.
Yes. Okay. That's what I thought. And that's where some of this idea of like the second brain in the gut is also kind of related to that also because because of that nerve. And just to commiserate with you, I watch Jeopardy like a religion, and there's so many times that there will be a clue about something I studied in college. And I'm like, I used to know that. And now I'm a mom.
Now it's like, I think it's amazing. It's like, I know where to get that information. I know exactly the book and I know kind of where in the book, but I don't have it right in front of me.
It is gone now.
I don't need to store it all in my brain.
Right.
Just not there.
It's true. This is why I don't like to give exams when I'm teaching, because I'm like, really what I want to know is, where to get the information and you know how to use the information, but I don't care if you can memorize the information. Yeah. So anyway, it's a little side note there, but yeah, I just wanted you to know that you're not alone in,
Thank you.
in lost information to parenthood, because I feel that too. So you mentioned this ability to kind of stay in that balanced state is a skill that somebody can build for themselves. And so I guess, what are some of the inroads that you find most helpful or most impactful in trying to establish that balance?
Absolutely. So I will say that, of course, in my work, everything is individualized because we're all coming in, with different bodies and experiences and systems. However, breath work is such an incredible tool to find balance, as well as movement, humming, talking to friends, being out in nature, being with pets. Just basically, it's like, we all have these things that we do that we know help us feel amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so probably we all have them already. Putting on our favorite song, taking a nice shower, right? Like, these are all things that are nice. But
Mm-hmm.
really, essentially, it all boils down to tuning into the breath and our five senses, and doing things that enhance that, and using those um, to just balance the system out.
To get to that balance.
Yeah.
What is the role of trauma in all of this? You mentioned trauma informed, that you do trauma informed yoga, right? And so what is that connection?
Well, we all go through traumas.
We sure do.
It's a universal life experience, right? And so
Yeah.
they talk about sometimes the big T's and the little T's. So
Mm-hmm.
no one escapes it. This might be just like small aches and pains. But a trauma essentially is something that we don't know how to work through. It just halts our preconception of how the world should be. And then we need to make adjustments. And our system really feels that.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be that in order to cope with it, we find ways of tightening in the body. We find ways of escaping. We find ways of I need to get really big because that makes me feel more powerful. So we're just all trying to not be wounded and
Mm-hmm.
compensate. So we just live in these bodies that are really jumping all around the nervous system map as we're trying to just navigate this crazy world.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this is unconscious. So my role in meeting people is certainly to work on making things a bit more conscious. And we might do that verbally, and also kind of use the body as a backdoor for that.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that you had said before, you had mentioned humming or putting on music that you love. I had COVID in November, right around Thanksgiving, and I have like a little lingering cough that it's just like a persistent little annoying cough, and it's been a couple of months now. But one of the things that'll really get it going is singing. And I've always sort of known that I use singing and music on my commute as a way to kind of decompress from a long day of working with people and feeling a little bit depleted. And it hasn't quite been available in the same way because of this little annoying cough.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm listening to the music and I'm maybe mouthing, like lip syncing along with the music, and it's not the same. It's not scratching that itch. And it's been interesting. Like I said, I mean, this was kind of a thing that I did on purpose. I have very specific songs that I like to listen to on my commute. And I have a whole playlist on my phone. I call it the Vishuddha playlist, which is the word for throat chakra. I like to get all of that energy out. And so it's not like I didn't realize that was a beneficial thing, but I have felt its loss so much in the last couple of months of just, I'll be driving home and I'll just be like, oh, I just want to like belt this out because I feel so much better when that is happening. Yeah.
Absolutely. And kind of looping back into talking about the impact of trauma. So often when we have a trauma, we lose our voice or we lose some
Mm-hmm.
part of ourselves. So very, very often for people, using the voice can be incredibly liberating as a way to take up more space and feel more expansive.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you're going to get it back.
I know.
And
It's coming
we
back
could,
a little bit.
it is a little bit, a little bit. Are you able to do like a little bit of humming just like to yourself
Oh,
without doing
yeah, a little
something?
bit. And I've been able to string together a few songs without having
Okay.
like a complete coughing fit. So
Okay. Well,
it's getting
there's,
better.
do you know bee breath?
No.
Well, we could either do it now or another
Yeah.
or
Well,
later.
is it an
Not that.
explainable thing? I was going to say if it's an explainable thing, let's share it with the people.
So bee breath is, well, it's explainable but also experiential.
Yep.
So it's a little breathing exercise. So you basically, you're going to have your hands over your ears.
Okay, well that's hard because I have my headphones on, but okay.
Right. So
Hands
you're going to
over
have
my
your
ears.
hands over your ears. You can have your eyes open or closed, and
Hmm.
you're going to hum to yourself. And just having the hands in your ears is going to make it so you
Oh,
get
you
a lot
feel
more
the
feedback.
vibration? Hmm.
Hmm.
Oh, see, I
And
can't feel it with my headphones on. I'm gonna have to do this one later.
okay. So I'm going to take a second and do it. Everyone,
Okay.
if you want to take in a second and try this and just see how it feels and go through like the AEIOU or whatever. But we want to hum, and sound can be nice. You can feel it really in your nostrils, but
Hmm.
we're trying to get as much feedback as possible in the nasal cavities.
Oh, okay.
Mm. And, um, it makes us aware of our bodies.
Hmm.
That's a great thing because
Hmm.
trauma can disconnect us from our bodies. It
Hmm.
disconnects us from the here and now. This connects us. And yeah, we're using our voice.
Oh, I love that. I'm gonna when I don't have a whole headgear on,
Mhm.
I'm gonna give that one a try.
Hopefully, it won't bring you into a coughing fit.
It might, but I'll survive it if it
Yeah.
does. Yeah. One of the other, just kind of a little add-on benefit to anybody that is listening that might want to use singing as a coping skill.
Mhm.
I also like the fact that it is a form of diaphragmatic breathing if we're
Absolutely.
really singing, right? So you were talking about breath work before, and the engaging of the diaphragm is one of the tools that we have to go from sympathetic nervous system to parasympathetic nervous system. And so, taking in a big deep breath to belt out, a big
Mhm.
sustained note is breath work in and of itself. And so
Absolutely.
you
Well
get kind
said.
of both of those benefits.
Mhm.
Yeah. I have I, I've had a thing rattling around in the back of my head, and I've talked about it here and there a little bit, but I've been especially waiting to talk to you about it because
Ooh,
I'm very curious.
sure.
And that is, so through grad school, early in my career as a therapist, I was on the CBT train. I was
Mhm.
all about we think things and that makes us feel things and then we behave in certain ways and it's thought based. There's not a ton of space, or at least when I was in grad school 15, 16, 17 years ago, there was not a ton of space to align nervous system regulation and cognitive behavioral aspects, which has, like I said, I've kind of been really becoming more and more interested in this nervous system perspective in the last couple of years. But one of the things that it's brought to mind to me is this idea of what I experience in myself. So I'm talking about me as a human moving through the world, being able to understand the difference now between my nervous system being activated and a worried thought,
Mhm.
and that sometimes they're happening at the same time for the same reason, and sometimes they're not, right? So
Mhm.
I can have a worried thought, I can be preoccupied with a worried thought, a stressed thought, maybe even an anxious thought, and feel that calm in my body. Or I can feel that activation, the tightness you were talking about, the shallow breathing, feeling you know, disassociated, just feeling kind of out of body, and not be really preoccupied with any thought at all. And so this idea of how they align, but then also can emerge differently or separately it's kind of a curious little thought to ponder as one does when they're into this kind of thing. And I'm just wondering what your take on any or all of that is.
So yeah, I got brought up on the CBT train as well.
Yeah, right. Boop, boop.
And hey, I don't really use that stuff that much right now.
Yeah.
However, one of the ways in which I will use it is to become, circling back to the nervous system, when we're in different states, often we're thinking different repeat thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be a sign that you're in activation to have the repetitive worried thoughts or the repetitive down thoughts. I'm bad. I'm not enough. Lately, the train I've been just really wanting to get on is the IFS train. And I've done a couple
internal
of
family systems for folks that are not familiar with the vernacular. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so beautiful to me and has become a very rich part of my work and my personal healing. And just that we have different parts that are alive in us from different points in our life that are speaking, right? So there might be points where one might come up as a intellectualized thought. One might come up as a signal from the body, especially if that's a wound from when we were very young that often does speak to us somatically. So this is all just ways in which our systems try to communicate with us. Ultimately, if we listen and can be calm and curious, and instead of beating ourselves up, there's just so much information there that we can tune into and learn about.
I think the calm and curious is a really key part of that, because I think otherwise it's so easy to fall into judgment and a need to respond or react.
Yes, I'll often say to people, like, it's mindfulness without compassion is it's nothing. Like a lot of people I used to be, sometimes I would talk about mindfulness without compassion. I'd have people come back and they're like, well, I was trying this and I was trying this and I was so aware. And then they just have tools to be more judgmental.
Yes.
Yes. And so really it is, about being the calm and curious and gentle and compassionate towards ourselves so that we can listen.
What's interesting though is I find that to almost be cyclical. So I was actually just having a conversation earlier today about nervous system response as it relates to attachment theory, right? And this idea of when there's an attachment wound, that nervous system's response, or even the thought-based response that you might be having as a full-grown adult moving through the world, is not the response of an adult. It is a response of that child that I do believe exists within all of us. And we carry that child through us. And so, so one of the things that I try to coach people on is, if you're, noticing you're having a certain reaction, a thought reaction, a behavior reaction, an emotional reaction, and to think about what your response to that could be. Like, imagine that it's to that child, like that you're not talking to your 30-something professional self. You're talking to a 3-year-old who's hurt or scared or feeling lost and alone or whatever, but that to me seems like it's such a great way to frame the experience, and also almost provides like a new way to respond to it, because it's like, well, you're not talking to yourself as an adult, you're talking to your child. And so talk to your child.
It's a completely new way of responding, and it can be incredibly healing. And the more I learn about it and the more I inquire, my own experiences, I just really have come to believe that, like, all of our emotional bits, they're all just younger parts that are just doing their best. And when that's the case, really the adult is out of the room. So
that's right.
So having the capacity whenever we can to come back and be the adult in the room towards towards ourselves can
Right.
be.
Yeah, I will often say your inner child is in the car, but you don't have to let them drive it.
Yes.
Right? Like that's also important to remember too. Like you get to be in charge. You get to be in charge.
It's way too much control to drive the car.
Yeah. we can't let the kids at the wheel. But I do think it's true. I actually have like a guided imagery visualization that I like to use where I'll, you know, encourage somebody in a safe and supported space to imagine, you know, if they have kind of any clarity around a memory, even of feeling, you know, pain as a child, feeling fear, feeling alone, feeling abandoned, can they visualize themselves as they are now approaching that child and think about like, what did you need to hear? And what would have been helpful to you in that moment? And can you give it to yourself now? Because, you know, one of the things that, and this is maybe turning into a side topic, I'm not sure, but we'll see. I think a lot of the messaging that I remember hearing as a young person who struggled was, you know, this idea of self-forgiveness. And I think anytime we use the word forgiveness, there's a denotation of wrongdoing, right? So if you're looking back on, you know, misanthropic teenage years, right? Like, do you really need to forgive that version of yourself? Because maybe she was just in a lot of pain, you know, and these behaviors were a result of that. So if you think about those experiences that you had, is self-forgiveness really the answer? Or do you just need to like get in there and just like love the shit out of little you? Right. And that to me, I find to be sort of a helpful way, to heal those wounds, because one of the things that I hear a lot is, now I'm aware of the wound, what do I do with it?
Yeah.
Right. And it feels like something that happened decades ago. You can't heal that. And I disagree.
We can absolutely go back. I do very similar exercises individually with people to get to know their parts and increase their own self-presence so they can feel towards it and enter the same space as it, and really just develop a relationship. Often we have multiple parts, and this whole in IFS they believe in multiplicity. So just we're living this whole family inside of us. So yeah, becoming a family. And people come in, and it's been the most transformational. It's the breathwork stuff, everything is a complement to it. It's another way to respond to the parts and to the system in a body-based way. But talking wise, this talking backwards to our younger parts has been the most healing and mind-blowing.
Yeah, I would agree. In the little bit that I've experienced it has been incredibly impactful. And it can be intense, you know, when I share that meditation or guided imagery exercise with folks, I'm always like, know where your people are when you finish it. You know, make sure that you're ready, because it could bring up some stuff.
Right.
You know?
And so some of the ways that I'll weave the somatic therapy, the polyvagal stuff in, is that it'll, being that the work can be very intense, it can become a lot. It can be a little flooding. And so then attending to the body and using it to find balance, we might find ourselves kind of shaking around the room, doing bilateral stim movements. And there's a whole series that we might go through.
Right. And I know that you infuse your work with yoga. Do you do postures and poses in a session, or do you keep those separate?
So it's really more yoga in the philosophical sense. It's there is sometimes some asana, some basic poses, but I use more just the philosophy. I use the breath work and the movement as a way to calm the system enough so that we can sit, so that we can feel more grounded. But it's not like your basic like vinyasa flow. It's more somatic movement than anything.
Okay.
But being that we can live so disconnected, for example, like someone might come into the room and be all just talking, but not really seem present. So I might just ask them to be curious, and do they need some movement? Where are they in their systems? And I might guide them. They might do their own thing, but then we might do some walking, some movement, some jumping jacks, and then slowly step down so that they're fully present.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that body disconnect, I think, is such an important part. I know, for just, again, like speaking from my own experience as a human in the world, it's so easy for me to be in my head that sometimes
We
I
live
forget
there.
I have a body. Right. Yes.
We absolutely can live. We can live in just too much of an extreme one way or another.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
All of us.
Yep. Yep.
that,
Yep.
that is the unconscious human condition.
Yes.
Totally.
But I've also learned, how much movement helps me. I tend to be a stressful walker, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm really feeling stressed out, like I just want to walk places. And if I'm home, I'll pace. And if I pace, I tidy. So if my home looks a little neater than normal, it probably means I've got something going on. Because if I'm agitated, I tend to pace around my house, and then I just start picking stuff up, putting it away. But it is all about just finding what works, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's no judgment. There's no judgment for that.
No. And yeah, so I'm not sure, I guess, like, because with this work, so much of it is experiential.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I'd say that's where a lot of my strength is the experiential stuff. So I don't know if there's a way to weave any of that in today, or if you want to just be talking or what.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm all ears.
I was going to say I'm tethered at the moment, so I can't get too far away. We should have done this one as a video one though, and I could have made you do all of the jumping jacks and shakeouts, and we could have had a dance party or something.
Another time.
Yes, another time. We'll do a YouTube segment. Yeah. When you are doing more of like the psychoeducation piece though, what are the things that you wish people knew about themselves, about nervous systems, about our current world? Like are there messages that you continuously come back to that you feel like you're explaining over and over and over again?
Yeah, that our nervous systems get dysregulated. Everyone's nervous system gets dysregulated.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to use that word dysregulated because, and I'll do some explanation into what that means, right? That includes anxiety, that includes anger, it includes like bursting out and wanting to punch things, like in all extremes. It includes the depression, the shutdown. Because so often people have all these stories and a lot of shame and guilt for
Mm-hmm.
when they have these big feelings, when they want to get away from them. Like anyone who's really felt anxiety, like you want to get away from this feeling. It feels terrible. And so there can just be a lot of self-blaming, and there can be a lot of negative messages that they've received from other people about just getting over it. And it can just be this whole cycle of not feeling like you're doing something right. So just the biggest thing is just that this happens to all of our systems.
Mm-hmm.
This is normal.
Right. And I think
in response to the world, often very normal in response to some of the things people are dealing with, and that they can always heal. There's none of these like little tiny windows of healing. Doesn't matter if you're 5 or you're 100, you can do things to reprogram your system and find some balance.
I think one of the things that I've really been struck by is a growing recognition of so much of what I think we call mental illness is just people walking around with dysregulated nervous systems.
Yes.
And then we're like, oh, but let's pathologize it. And I want to be like, no, let's just calm it.
I hate diagnosing. Working with insurance, I have to diagnose, but I hate it. I really see that so often, especially coming from where people have been in these complex worlds, that we're just doing the best we can, and all the ways in which we compensate create some of these problems when we're no longer in these situations anymore. So yeah, I really don't want to pathologize people's experiences.
Right.
And yeah, I think that the mental health field has a lot of learning to do and a lot of
I would
growing.
agree. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Um, are you familiar with Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski?
No.
Okay. It has become like my new little mini Bible. And it's
Mm.
so good. Because really it talks about a lot of these same principles, but looks at it through the lens of how then we end up super crispy fried because we are activated all of the time. And one of, in the opening of the book, they really lay out very well, like how our nervous system, particularly amygdala response and nervous system activation, was a survival skill. And that, as we've evolved as humans and into these societies, like what used to be a very concrete, cut and dry, you're getting chased through the woods by a wild animal, now is, your taxes are due, your partner's going to lose their job, your kid is in trouble at school, you got cut off
Even
in
if you see
traffic.
something online that's stressful, or
Right.
like your
Right.
findings, like it could be like just like we have very ancient bodies living in these modern worlds, so we're
Right.
constantly having stress responses.
Yeah. Yeah. And that when we're unable to get ourselves out of it, the response doesn't get turned off. Right. And so that, when they use the analogy of being chased through the woods by an animal, it's like you either escape the animal, or kill the animal. And that was a clear sign of like, okay, I'm out of danger, or you died. Right. Either way, the stress response turned off. And that, what we're facing now, and they wrote their book specifically for folks who are socialized women, identify as women, and the unique pressures facing women in this current society as reasons why we're all finding ourselves burnt out. And that the state of burnout keeps us activated, right? When you talk about like self-blame and you talk about the really awful ways we talk to ourselves, like I think about so many people who are just in complete state of overwhelm all the time and internalize that as I must not be doing something correctly, right? We're comparing ourselves to other people's social media accounts or, images that we face on the street. I'm like, that's all just somebody's like outside glossy. You have no idea what kind of train wreck is going behind that. But because we don't know, we make assumptions, and they're often assumptions that are not in our favor.
Absolutely, absolutely, right. Where most of the time left to the unconscious, our brain's going to go in this negative route. It takes a
Mm-hmm,
lot of
mm-hmm.
effort to come in a kinder way and really look at the reality, to see all the biases we might be adding.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But you're right, right? Like our society is so go, go, go. People are so rewarded for doing the impossible, for not taking time off from work,
Mm-hmm.
for, you're supposed to work like you don't have a kid and have a kid like and raise them like you don't work and
Right.
do have a perfect home. Like it's impossible. So of course we're burnt out, we're vibrating, and then we can't sleep, and then we're more stressed, and there's just such a vicious cycle. I really see so much of what's going on with insomnia, with anxiety, with depression
Mm-hmm.
is just us living in these like really unkind to our system cultures.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. I talk a lot to folks about I have no scientific basis for this terminology. It just works for me. But I use the term calibration a lot, right? And so when we are go, 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 we're in the hustle, we're doing all the things we quote unquote should be doing, that we become calibrated to a certain energetic
Yep.
sensation, right? And then when we want to come to rest, that feels wrong. It feels incorrect. It feels like something's not right.
Our system has no idea how to do it anymore.
Right. And I think one of the things too, when we think about this idea of nervous system, to emphasize the system, right? Systems only know balance. They're not particularly smart. They're attuned, right? They're excellent executing what they're designed to do, but they don't have a lot of discernment in terms of, oh, right, this is a Saturday afternoon and I'm sitting on my couch and it's okay, right? And so it's just like, no, I'm used to this tempo up here, and I don't know how to re-regulate or recalibrate to be at this tempo down here. I use the story every once in a while. Not this past holiday break, I did much better. But last year, I took the week between Christmas and New Year's off. And it took 2 to 3 days to stop having a full body reaction. And the way that showed up for me, the best way I can describe it is the feeling that you get when you are walking down a flight of stairs and you think you're about to miss one. And that whole jerk that your body does. It was that sensation for about 3 days. Every time my brain was like, you should be doing something. And my whole body would react. And I was like, no, I'm off this week. Like, my kids are with their father. Like, I don't have anything to do except go be on my couch. It was so uncomfortable to be in that sensation. And I really had to just sit with myself and say, it's okay that it's uncomfortable. Stay at rest. You don't have to respond by going back into that upper calibration. You can stay here. Just let yourself get used to it. But it was hard.
Yeah. It's so hard. It's so hard. And it takes time.
Mm-hmm.
It takes time to get to that rest state. And then once we're there, it's like, we don't want to go back out of it at all.
I don't know that I've achieved that yet. I'll keep working on it. I'll keep trying. I always joke, like, I'm never going to retire because I can't fathom being that much at rest. Mm-hmm. I do have a Capricorn moon. So I think that keeps me kind of like on a particular pace. It's about setting boundaries around that pace, I think, so that sometimes my industriousness is for me and not in the service of other folks. But that's just my story.
Yeah, it's I don't know what the future would be like for me if I could actually do nothing for a long time. I guess I've never really had the opportunity, but it's taken a long time. Like, years ago, I was just this workaholic working at an agency job. My system was at that calibrated high, anxiety, migraines, all of that. And it took a while after I was able to step back, slow down a little bit in my work, in my life, like slowly do movement regularly, do all the things I now teach a bit. But like, my system is now more able to be at rest. I think it's something that we need to train and really practice. Practice what's so uncomfortable. So we
and get out of the headspace of capitalism.
Yes.
Right. That you're only as good as what you produce.
Please. Yes. You are wonderful just as you are.
Yeah. Yep.
It doesn't matter what you produce. Just for being you, you are wonderful and lovable, and you have all the answers.
That's right. It's funny, I was talking to my therapist and I said to her, I was like, I took the week between Christmas and New Year's off. I didn't work. I didn't do anything. I, edited a couple podcast episodes and answered like 3 emails. And she's like, so you did work. I was like, yes, but I did that in bed. And so I got half credit because I was in a warm, cozy spot when I did it. But I think too, like, it's tough because calibration and nervous system aside, it also is really fulfilling to do I don't want to speak for you, but I find this work very fulfilling, and there are times where it doesn't feel like work. And I think that might be one of the places I get tripped up too. I'm like, editing a
Yes,
podcast
that's one of
episode
the
is
ways
gonna,
in which, like, there's times where I find myself like aching for it a little bit
yeah,
because connection, right? Like this human connection, these heart to hearts, which we get to have as
mm-hmm,
therapists, as coaches,
mm-hmm,
that's really nice to my system.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Like really nice.
yeah,
And I try to not, I try to find the fulfillment in other ways too.
yes, yes, yes,
And that need in that way. But yeah, we do need connection, and we're lucky enough to get it from our work too.
that's right.
I think there's certainly times where it's easy to push because of something in our heads, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's great you love
How
what
do
you
you make the decision or discern what is hustle and what is personal investment, like a healthy motor
mm,
versus a
mm,
societal motor, shall we
mm,
say?
yeah. Ooh, that would make me want to check in with that part, right? Like, what is going on here? What are the beliefs here that are driving this?
Mm-hmm.
Is this really a should? Is I think the motive and the why makes so much of a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And we're so in capitalism. I think it's really hard to completely separate ourselves from it.
I think so too. I do believe that. And I think that's one of the things that makes it challenging to set those boundaries and draw
Mm-hmm.
those lines, because it's insidious and in many ways then unconscious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
But it could just also be like, is this something that will make your heart expand and help you find some ease?
right.
Or is this a
Ease. That's a
should?
good word.
You know, is there some kind of belief here, some kind of fear disguising itself
Right.
of what might happen if you don't do this?
Right. Right. Because we're really good at that
Oh yeah.
justification, right? Of like, oh no, I'm not doing this because I should. I'm doing this because I want to, right? But it's like,
Mhm.
do you? Or are you
Yeah.
just not in touch with that? Right. Yeah. 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 And it's tough. I've found, to your point, like trying to find the answers in my body.
Hmm.
Where can I feel it? And whenever it feels tight and like an armadillo, that's usually a sign that I'm on the incorrect path.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Because I turn in. I'm like, zoop.
Yeah, I get some tension and disconnection. Those are
Mm-hmm.
my things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, we all have ways in which our body's telling us something for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Yeah. Learning
And
to listen to it. It's so hard.
it's so hard because it becomes like a second job.
Yes.
And it's hard to do all the time. And I guess coming back to one of the things that you had asked me before, of things I tell people, of that it's not about getting it right all the time.
Mm.
Like, we're going to miss the mark sometimes, and that's okay. But this healing and this learning to be our own ally and really, be kinder to ourselves and be well in this wild society, I think is just a matter of being more at ease than we were before.
Mm-hmm.
It's recovering faster than we used to. It's that things aren't as intense that they used to. It's not about us never getting stressed or anxious or angry, like, because we're going to have responses to the world. That's a part of being human. We're not looking to just be like naively happy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But the key is here is like not living in that space and being able to come out of it.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that so much, because it's the ability, it's equanimity, right? To bring it to a Buddhist place. It's that idea of you can stand on the shoreline and the waves can come. And all you really just need to do is just keep your feet in the sand. You don't have to beat back the wave. You don't have to catch it. You don't have to send it back to the ocean. You also don't have to get knocked over by it.
Yeah.
You just have to kind of stay steady, stay balanced, and just let it come and let it go. Yeah. And it's not easy. Simple, not easy.
Yeah. It's ongoing work, like it's life work.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I want to impart is that we can always come back to consciousness. Like we might find ourselves living in daydreams. Like
Mm-hmm.
how often when we're driving, when we're doing things, we just kind of like tune out from reality and dissociate mildly, right? Because we're just like in our la la land. And so anytime we think of it, like right now, for example, can be a time to take a full belly breath. It could be a time to reach your arms out and up and stretch a little bit side to side or twist. If you feel like your body wants to jump up and down
Mm-hmm.
right now, do it a tiny bit. Okay, that's your little intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we're not talking about or I don't talk about you have to go to an hour of yoga and eat all the leafy greens. It's not about we all know the things that might make us healthy and cool, we'll do them when we can. But it's about these little moments and choices.
Mm-hmm.
It's about once again and again, noticing where we're at and choosing to meet our own needs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that might mean different things. It might mean I really need to rest. Okay. Or it might mean I really need to jump around. And just these 30 seconds, minute, just choosing these things for ourselves again and again and again can have profound impacts on our day.
Right. Yeah, that's so important. And I think something I would add to that is recognizing that you described it before as a lifelong practice. And I think something that goes along with that is it might mean a little bit of trial and error too.
Oh, yeah.
Because some of the things, well, you talk a lot about movement and I with the exception of kind of my pacing behaviors and dancing for joy, my inclination when I hear you say that is no, I want to get in my bed with my weighted blanket. When I'm feeling dysregulated, for me, it's not necessarily movement that's going to help. Most of the time, it's actually going to be that weight, right? Which is also why I love my dog so much, because she's like a 95-pound weighted blanket. I can literally call her over and she will get on me because she thinks she's a 10-pound Pomeranian. She's a 90-pound lap, right? And so, but that weight and that warmth is so regulating for me,
Right. And to that, I would say, awesome, do it.
Mm-hmm.
But you might, what would it be like sometimes to just shake it out a tiny bit, even for 30 seconds,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then step it down and take some mindful steps around the room and then step it down and take some belly breaths and then lay down.
And cuddle.
Right. There's times we go too fast. People will be come in and so anxious, be I can't meditate. Because there's part of them wants to sit and knows they should, but their systems are all the way up here. So part of the work too is wherever we are, let's start there and then let's go the other way. And for the person who's stuck laying on the couch and deeply depressed and can't get up, we want to add more heat. And that might be okay. If you're laying down, sit up, feel your feet on the ground, start to take some belly breaths with even breath. See how you can pair your arm movements with breath. Then can you stand up? Can you add a little bit more pace? And so it's a matter of, that's great wherever we are and wherever we want to be, but we want to help ourselves get there. Right. It can be, our systems can really not want, it can feel like there's a big block of I know what I should do, but I can't.
Yes, I hear that a lot.
And that's a very real thing.
It is.
And at some point, sometimes we just for whatever the reason, we're just okay, I'm doing the next thing. We can just reach that point, sometimes we do it ourselves. Sometimes we need someone to help us with some encouragement.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it can be hard.
Yeah.
This is
it
where
is.
we have all the answers inside of us. We have all the tools. It doesn't mean it's easy to use in practicality. But this is also where whatever we can do daily and build some habit around, the easier it's going to be to use. It's the hardest part right at the beginning, right? And ideally, for example, someone with a panic disorder, like they're not just practicing their breathing skills when they're having a panic attack.
Right.
It's like, whatever the thing is, whether it's talking to ourselves a bit more kindly, whether it's deep breathing or whatever, we want to try to see, can we just build some kind of practice? Is there something we can try to say yes to every day? So we're building some muscle memory.
Yeah.
And we're like kind of creating a pathway where it might be really weedy and grown over to start.
Right. You got to get in there.
It can be hard, but these are the kinds of things that really, it's like if we can keep doing it over time, the pathways change. But that's, I think, the hardest part too, is just that sometimes it can take a while. It can take time, and that's hard.
Right.
It's really hard.
One of the very first things you mentioned was getting in touch with the five senses. And I'm wondering if you have any specific activities that you use with clients or that you use in your own life toward that end.
So things that I love to do. Have you heard of the homunculus?
I have, but I need a refresher.
So everyone out there, look up a picture of the homunculus. It is this distorted version of a person where certain parts of the body are really, really big and certain parts are really, really small. And the idea is the parts that are really, really big have a ton of sense receptors that go to that key into parts of the brain that can be in touch with the parasympathetic nervous system and help us calm down. So the hands, the feet, our eyes, our ears, our mouth, all big, really big in the homunculus. So touch is a really big one. Things that I love to do. I love rolling my feet on yoga balls. This could be just basically anything. It could be a water bottle to really ground. It's like we're literally grounding our feet by doing this activity, and you will potentially feel a little different after you do that. It could be just rubbing our hands together. It could be that as we sit with our hands on our lap, that we inhale and raise our hands up, and exhale and put our hands down. Just really just feel the place in which our hands touch our legs and feel the heat, the differences if our hands are then on our lap versus touching a table or a pen, right? And just like noticing these small things with our eyes as we look around, noticing shapes, colors, beauty, without judgment, right? We want to just stop with the stories, but see something and label it. So like, I see a lamp. This is a lamp. Hearing sound, smelling things that are lovely to us. Aromatherapy can be great for that. Noticing the tastes in our mouth, just whatever it is, really just allowing ourselves to tune into it.
Yeah. Did we miss anything? Was there anything else you had wanted to say before we wrap up?
We spoke about so much.
We did. I knew we would.
Yeah, no, I think we covered a lot, and I'd love to maybe come back and do a planned series with you, something on video. Yeah. Because as I said, a lot of this is experiential.
Right.
And this way, I think having the visual could be lovely.
We can make that work. Yeah, for sure.
So,
cool.
Thank you.
And we will put some of the wonderful resources that you mentioned in the show notes, and people can learn a little bit more about your work there too.
Yep. Oh, actually, yes. With the yoga therapy training that I have, there's a program called Overcome Anxiety.
Mhm.
It's a 4-part series over 8 weeks, and I'm finally gearing up to offer it in person. I'll
Hooray.
probably start in February or March. It'll be very limited,
Okay.
probably just 4 to 8 people. But for someone interested who really wants to dig in and learn this, I'd be happy to teach you.
Awesome. Awesome. That's great. We'll make sure that that information is included too.
Awesome. Thank
Cool.
you, Courtney.
Thank you, Gemma. I appreciate you so much. And we'll be
Same.
right back. Thank you so much to Gemma for being with us today and sharing all of that really wonderful information. The more that I explore nervous system response in the world today, the more, well, maybe the less I believe that there's anybody conceivably walking around not activated. Things are just really challenging with the pandemic, with the hustle culture, with day to day stress of parenting or juggling multiple roles. And so, I think sometimes we assume that the only people that need to hear this information are people that maybe have diagnosable disorders or are in therapy. And I would disagree, gently disagree, because I do think that we are subjected to a lot of just things that will stimulate and activate our nervous system on the regular. So, if this information was helpful to you, I hope that you can start to employ some of it in your life and bring yourself some calm and some peace and some rest. We will be back next week with a brand new episode. You can find us on all the major platforms for podcasts, and wherever you're listening, we would love it if you would rate, review, and subscribe. If you love this content, please share it with a friend because they might love it too. And don't forget that you can send topic ideas, guest recommendations, questions, or other commentary to me at Courtney@shineandsoar.com or by completing the contact form on shineandsoar.com/podcast. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other.